Hey everyone, welcome to our sixth episode of WWM Marketer, our podcast that seeks to spark authentic and meaningful conversations with marketers from all over the world. Today we'll be having Phil, Managing Director of Hello Earth, an ethical e-commerce growth agency, where we will talk about his journey within the advertising / DTC space, all the way from the UK. Welcome to the pod, Phil.
Hi Yee, thanks for having me.
All right, so I wanted to know about Hello Earth itself. What does it essentially mean as an ethical e-commerce growth agency?
Yeah, good question. So the priority with that question is we search for brands and we speak to brands about who are focused on providing a benefit to a number of things, and that could be a benefit to the planet, a benefit to people, that could be a benefit to a specific cause that they're trying to support. So on one half, it's around sustainability, and that's products that are trying to improve how sustainable we are.
Right.
So that could be, trying to get rid of single-use plastic products. Potentially it's like a reusable razor or something like that as an example. So trying to change how we behave as we consume products and we purchase products, trying to basically push consumers to make better buying decisions. So that's from a sustainability point. And then the other half is where a brand or a product might not be sustainable, but it's trying to support a cause. So that could be like women's sexual health. It could be women's safety. It could be education. So we try not to work with brands where the focus is just on consumption and
profit, right?
and profit. Yeah, ultimately, purpose and profit do work together. So that's a constant, compromise that we have to deal with. But yeah.
Right. I'm wondering what would be an interesting industry that you witnessed that you would like to share to the audience that you work with in some social impact. We'd love to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm really proud as an agency. We work with some really cool people, clients, brands, products. When you're building an agency, you kind of think, I don't want to work with dull brands. It's sort of, that's just really boring to work on where the topic of the product is just boring. So I'm really proud that that's not the case, and a lot of them are really cool brands. So we've worked with a number of sort of drinks or snack brands where their packaging might be more ethical. It's not plastic; it's recyclable or biodegradable, or canned, like wine in a can instead of wine in a bottle, because potentially tin can be recycled a lot easier. That's an example. And then also clothing. So obviously clothing is one of the elements of e-commerce, which is usually bad for the planet. A lot of water gets used in manufacture of clothing. So we work with a number of brands where their manufacturing of the clothes is a lot more sustainable. They also pay their workers a lot better. So from a purpose point of view, we're being nicer to the people manufacturing the clothes. And then also we across clothing specifically, we work with a number of brands where the quality of the clothing is much better. The price is obviously a lot higher, but then instead of buying, 5 items of clothing over 2 months, you might only need to buy 1 because you're going to get a much longer lifespan out of that clothing and potentially, especially when it comes to children's wear and children's clothing, you might be able to pass that clothing on to a little brother or sister because it's been manufactured that well that it's lasted, rather than everything just being single use. It's only going to last 2 weeks and then you've got to bin it and put it on a landfill. Yeah.
Right. So it's more like quality products that can last long lasting. So you reduce the consumption overall, but in return you have a good quality product for them to use. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Wow. And I'm wondering, since you're running a purpose-driven brands, helping them to do the advertising, what would you say is the most interesting challenge you have faced as the brand agency owner in terms of helping them to achieve their goals? Do you have any the most challenging case studies like to share with the audience?
Yeah, for sure. So A lot of agencies will come out and say, we work with brands who are doing, who are spending 15k on ads a month or 30k on ads a month, and they'll sort of put like a bottom limit on the size of brand that they work with. And that's usually because those brands who are very early in their journey, that's usually the toughest part. And that's the toughest part because their brand and product hasn't been validated yet.
Right. No product market fit, right?
Yeah, no product, exactly. So, the founder really loves the brand and the product that they've made naturally, but we haven't yet understood if the customers actually A, already understand what the problem is and need a solution, B, know that product could exist, or C, are willing to pay the price that brand has set for the product. So that's usually where most of the difficulty and the frustration happens, is when we're trying to disrupt the market, and that's usually quite an expensive thing to do, and that's why a lot of these brands might generate venture capital or funding to try and disrupt the market as quickly as possible, to sort of get to that growth stage as quickly as possible. So that's usually the most common issue that we come across. Obviously, when we do work with plenty of brands who are already 2, 3, 4 years down their journey, and that's obviously it's a different conversation that we have then. The second issue that most often comes around is obviously if a product is going to be better made, more sustainable, we're paying the manufacturers a lot more, the price of that product is going to be more expensive. And then, customers might go from paying £15, $15 for a product, and we're asking 150. There's that's just an example, but a big jump. That's obviously there's a conflict there between the brand and the customer, and we either then reduce the price or we work very hard to try and find an audience and who will understand why the product is that price point. Yeah.
And it's very interesting to hear how the challenge is establishing a product market fit. And I think it's really common for a lot of agencies that just got started, that work with a lot of startup brands. How does Hello Earth approach the problem of helping the brands to figure out their product market fit through advertising or through any marketing strategy? How would you guys approach this?
Yeah, for sure. So consumers, customers, audiences on platforms, especially on Facebook and Instagram, they react to change very quickly.
Yeah.
So we can gain product market fit quite quickly. A year ago, to where we are now, customers change, their habits change very quickly. A trend can take off within a week and all of a sudden go from, not existing to being like this big, like a hype train. But the key thing that has to happen for that to exist is audience and product legibility. So in the creative, in the message, in the landing page, every piece of communication, the audience has to understand, who are you trying to talk to? Are you talking to me? Are you talking to someone like me that has my problems and my issues and what I'm looking for, my aspirations? Can I see myself in your communication? And then product, what are you trying to sell me? And if you make that audience and product legibility very black and white and very easy to digest, the likelihood of generating product market fit increases a lot. As soon as you try and overcomplicate the message, not get to the product quick enough, focus too much on the problem and the solution rather than the audience and the product, because ultimately there is a person at the end of that ad. And so legibility across all of those different topics is very key. Yeah.
Right. Is it more like, instead of pushing a solution to solve a problem you think that exists, instead of doing that, you went the other way to really try to dig in to see what are the existing problems rather than pushing on what you think that the audience will want. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. And there's two different conversations that you need to be having at the same time, and that's obviously problem aware and product aware, and we need to try and speak to both of those people at the same time. there's going to be people who are already aware of the problem and aware of what type of product they might need to solve that problem. And those are, like in market. So to gain like a quick piece of traction, we're going to try and convert those sooner because their sales funnel is going to be very, they're already looking for this product. They've already got this problem. So we're going to try and convert them very quick. So they're the low hanging fruit. So if we can win with them, that buys us a bit more time to try and win with the people who are, less aware of what the problem is. Yeah.
Right. And speaking of which, since you mentioned that we were trying to find an audience that were in market in a sense, but since with the iOS optimization kick in with Facebook, Instagram, the interests are kind of falling out of favor, would you guys still use interest targeting as part of a campaign to try to find product market fit, or would you use broad targeting, but with the messaging or the hooks to let algorithm find it and then you iterate from that? How does it work?
For sure. Yeah, good question. We still definitely use broad and interest targeting, especially if it's a brand that's like very early days, and we almost use them both to A/B test the other. So we use an interest stack. Is broad targeting outperforming this? And then we use broad to say, is the interest targeting the right audience and to go after? And we allow Facebook to spend against either. We do have the understanding that customers will likely fit into both audiences at the same time. Right. Like I will fit into the interest stack because I tick all of these boxes, but at the same time, Facebook will target me via the broad audience. So we're not using two different ad sets to reach two different groups of people. We kind of use it. It's the same audience. It's just how we get there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because I was wondering, like, when I was discussing and debating, like, should we use both at the same time? I've got the question from my peers was like, oh, what if there's a conflict? You're just competing each other for the ads. Like, shouldn't you just run one? And I'm just surprised to see you have a similar approach to mine as well.
Yeah, like the issue with audience overlap, running the same or similar targeting, what will happen there? If you use campaign budget optimization, that's going to try and limit that audience overlap, and it will, if Facebook doesn't want to spend against broad, then that's great, that's fine. And especially if the interest ad set is performing and hitting target KPIs, then that's great. We'll allow it not to spend against broad. We do generally, so the idea of audience overlap also comes with the idea of the funnel being a triangle. Yes. Top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel. That's not the funnel anymore. The funnel is now a lot more horizontal, where me as a customer will fall through different top of funnel ad sets. Right. And we see that all the time in Shopify and Google Analytics, where a customer will get warmer visiting different, broad, they got targeted, then they went into the interest ad set, then they went back into broad. So there is overlap, but I don't believe it impacts performance.
Right, because at the end, like, it's kind of a retargeting, would you say, instead of purposely writing a retargeting ad, driving out a CPM just to target that sort of people, just let Facebook does the same thing by just putting broad versus interest in that sense.
Yeah, and ultimately that's because Facebook's trying to drive the best performance for us. So if this broad ad set or interest ad set, whichever one it is, it doesn't matter. If broad can retarget someone, show an impression for the second time because it thinks this person is about to convert, that ad set will do that because we're telling it we want a purchase.
Right. True.
So it's going to go after and try and reach that peak. Yeah.
That's true, because I was debating with my peers about the fundamental concept of does retargeting still work in nowadays? Because with iOS optimization going away and like if we go out of Facebook, it's hard for us to track it. So I have this debate with my colleagues like, do we even need to run retargeting? And should we just ditch the retargeting and just prospect 100% and then just let it do its job? What are your thoughts on this?
I would say we've got ad accounts that do every different option. So we've got ad accounts that only run top of funnel. We've got ad sets that run retargeting middle of funnel and bottom of funnel. We've got ad sets that just have middle of funnel. It definitely comes down to the ad account, the product, the amount of spend, the amount of traffic from other sources. Because obviously, if you've got a lot of influencer, a lot of TV advertising, a lot of organic traffic coming to the website, you're going to want to spend. You're going to want to define a budget against converting that audience, and not just hope that top of funnel campaigns retarget the traffic that's coming from TV. You're going to want to try and convert that hot traffic. Someone's seen a TV ad yesterday. I want to, and then come to the website. I want to then show them an ad the next day, and I'm going to put a budget against that. And that's where you would use a retargeting campaign. The issue is Facebook have obviously complicated the topic by bringing out Advantage Plus shopping, and the idea there being that you only really need one campaign. So that will do retargeting on its own for sure. I also believe that the purpose of retargeting changes over time, because Black Friday, Cyber Monday, gifting, Mother's Day, any of these seasonal peaks, if your brand aligns with a seasonal peak, you're going to want to define a budget to hit those warm audiences and say, I've got a really hot offer. I know these people are going to convert, and I'm going to spend X amount of money to put ads in front of them. Right. And that's all your retargeting campaign really does. It's keeping your brand and product top of mind. To people who already know about you. Yeah.
Right. So would you say it's not as fixed as pre-iOS, like back in the days where it's like a really strict, I can assume that audience will definitely follow a tofu, a mofu, or bofu, but now it's more like, oh yeah, I think it will kind of work, but we just have to test it out, sort of phase, right?
Yeah, and then you've got to understand, how much of retargeting is view-through attribution. We want to cut that out, so we might just use 7-day click at retargeting.
Right, true.
You want to understand the conversion rate of so you want to understand the conversion rate of the retargeting in GA. So, okay, is our retargeting campaign actually driving incremental sales that I wouldn't have got if I just had this top of funnel spend? So yeah, you need to spend a little bit more time on trying to understand if actually you should. Just, because the other option is you just take that spend that you've got retargeting and you put it at top of funnel to drive more new eyeballs. Yeah.
Right. And I've checked out your podcast, and you have mentioned something about how in the past agency owners would rely on liking indicator, and afterwards, and then the lagging indicator comes in, like the click-through rate, time on site, because previously we're still relying on ROAS and all that. And right now, with these sort of secondary metrics coming into play, how would you tie them together so to make sure that you can use it to make better decisions rather than just relying on like the ROAS and all that?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a difficult situation, because ultimately still our clients pay us for results and KPIs, and they'll be aligned with spend, revenue, ROAS, cost per purchase, those lagging indicators. So we still need to keep all of our vision on those. However, we'll use those leading indicators, like you said, so the on-platform soft metrics, the traffic quality in GA. We'll use those as indicators to understand, should we push more spend into this? Should we reduce spend from this? Ultimately, if this campaign is converting at a certain rate, and we can understand that because of a lagging indicator, if we take one single leading indicator, like a click-through rate, which is 0.5%, and we improve that to 1% by generating new creative, testing different hooks, we improve that click-through rate from 0.5 to 1, and all of the other metrics stay the same, ultimately the performance will be better. So, and we actually did that recently, where we launched some new content into like performance UGC content into an ad account. Performance was great from a CPA and a ROAS point of view, right, but the click-through rate and the thumb stop rate was quite low. So we created iterations of that content with the focus of improving the click-through rate and the thumb stop, right, with the expectation that conversion rate, CPA, the conversion rate and the lagging indicators will stay the same. So therefore, we'll have cheaper traffic that converts at the same rate. Ultimately, that improves return on ad spend.
Right. So it's like pairing like click-through rate and then ROAS. But I'm wondering, for this case, would it be the on-platform ROAS, or would you look at Shopify overall ROAS when it comes to KPI setting and all that?
Yeah, sure. So we still use. Good question. So for all clients, we look at both a blended performance metric and a like an in-platform, or if we're using like an attribution platform, we'll use Triple Whale or North Beam. But the idea is to have one eye on blended, so that we can understand if as we increase spend, does overall revenue increase, but we also need to understand what's going on in the platform, because last year we spent a lot of time fighting against the platform. Looking in GA, trying to second guess what Facebook was doing. But whereas this year, what we've done is we've tried to lead into the data that Facebook has. So where is it spending? That's a very strong leading indicator. What is the in-platform performance? Because ultimately, if we're getting a 2x and we can improve that in-platform ROAS to a 3x, the overall performance of Shopify will improve.
Right, I see. So it's using the spend indicator as a way to show that you are working with Facebook and making the right choice, rather than trying to force spend on other ad sets and trying to prove a point.
Yeah, for sure. And ultimately that aligns with, the efficiency of the ad account, because obviously if we're over ROAS, if we're under our CPA and we're scaling, we can start to push some of that spend into different places. If the account is under efficient, we're under ROAS, we're under target, then allocating spend to different assets will only hurt that. And by using, CPO where possible, different things like that, we'll play, the platform will play nicer with us. Yeah.
True. Because you're giving them the control and letting them to have more opportunity to explore what they think works best, rather than using ABO where we try to force them on spending things they think the audience might not like. They could be wrong, but they will punish us perhaps with like higher CPMs and everything like that. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Right. And I wanted to ask as well, as every agency, we always have the problem of whenever the clients come in and excited to work with us, sometimes they're just not ready for the ads. And how would you guys evaluate whether or not a brand is ready to dive into the advertising world?
It's got to be aligned with a good question. And the worst, I can imagine the nightmares that happen when you onboard a client and then they're not professionally ready or personally ready to start investing. So, cash flow is really important. Are they in a position to pay for your services as an agency, invest into marketing? Are they in a position to afford a loss, especially at the start? Or, efficiency from a profit and loss point of view to get worse, especially if they haven't been advertising. We're going to be testing the platform as a whole. Is Facebook ads right for you as a brand? We're going to be testing audiences. We're going to be testing creatives. We're going to be testing product market fit. And every test is an opportunity to lose money.
True. Yes.
So they've got to have the cash flow and the sort of like the runway to afford that. So having an open conversation around that and being transparent about what we expect the next few months to look like, you'll look more likely to have a difficult time if the client is over-focused on fast results, especially if they haven't been advertising, if they haven't advertised before. Obviously, if they've got 2 years of history in the ad account and they're getting a 2x and they think we can get to a 2.5, there's probably going to be things that we can do to try and get you there quite quickly. Right. Obviously, if they've never advertised, they don't know product market fit, and they're thinking they're going to get a 5x return on ad spend. There's no data to support, to prove that. And obviously, we're entering a new, the lights are turned off at the moment. We need to find our way in the dark room.
In the dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because I'm wondering, like, there are some brands that say they came and then they say that, oh, other agencies just use lifetime value, like assuming that you are willing to lose money upfront, and using that assumption and then to say, oh, you are eligible to run ads. Have you met cases like that from other brands?
We just, funnily enough, we haven't worked with that many brands who are over invested into, playing the long game from a lifetime value point of view and affording, a massive loss up front. And I think that's because most of the brands that we work with have like a very high quality and have very desirable product, so that customers do want to buy it. So even if that brand does have a lifetime value against that customer, they're not having to afford a huge loss up front. However, if we were speaking to a brand who was in that case, you've just got to be transparent about that lifetime value potentially not being the case. And, what happens if 6 months down the line, the lifetime value that you're thinking the lifetime value is going to be $200, actually works out to be $100, and you've been paying $150 for a CPA. And so, that's a very different conversation, and that would dramatically change cash flow, because you're expecting all this cash to come from the lifetime value of these customers, and then that just never appears. And then you're not going to be able to afford to acquire new customers. And that's the game that those sort of brands play, isn't it? Constantly acquiring new customers, because then that lifetime value pot just gets bigger and bigger over time. So, I mean, ultimately it comes down to whose money you're playing with. If as the brand owner, if it's your own money, you're going to be in a different position. If it's venture capital or funding, it's someone else's money. Yeah, it's a different conversation, isn't it? So, yeah, it's an interesting topic. Yeah, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, because I do see cases where I've seen agency that use LTV and not like, for example, they say, okay, based on this AOV, we believe we can push it to that amount in the future. So with that assumption, we can run your ads rather than asking what's your cash flow. And they chose to disregard that and use future revenue so that the owners can buy into working with them. So I just found it interesting, and I'm just wondering, like, is it common with other DTC agencies? Like, would you guys care about asking the cash flow question, or would you guys use future revenue with the assumption that they can make back the money, especially for, let's say, owners that are small scales and don't have venture capital funding? Like, would you guys still use LTV, or would you guys just say, nah, just profit margins, and can you afford to lose money?
Yeah, profit margins. We wouldn't use, in that position, small brand, their own cash flow, not venture funding. We would use, profit margins and what they want that profit margin and efficiency of the account. They might just want to break even. They might want to make a small loss because they're going to grow it to a certain point and then get venture funding, so they need to show that growth. We would have that conversation and not try and. Ultimately, if the brand came to us and they had made that decision on LTV, that's a very different conversation to the agency trying to use LTV, expected LTV, as a way to justify them running the ads. I actually think you as an agency, you're better spending time on the things that will reduce your cost per purchase, rather than things that will justify why you can keep performing at that cost per purchase. Because the LTV is like a justification, isn't it? It's it's a difficult. There's a difficult conversation to have, for sure.
Yeah, it's a big debate as well. Like, because I've seen like different school of thoughts. Like, some marketing agencies thinking that LTV is for certain, like, we're gonna hit that goal and more revenue driven. But some other agencies like, nah, let's look at the cost. Like, can they really afford that? Like, if we make the assumption of every single business that can take losses, they will go bankrupt, man. Like, the more we scale, the more likely, the faster they're gonna go bankrupt. Like, and then you're just banking on the fact that you're gonna get all the LTV. What if it doesn't? So,
if you play the LTV game, there's a chance you will run out of cash.
Right, higher chance.
yeah, there's a higher chance you will run out of cash because that LTV isn't guaranteed, and a lot of brands that you see now going bankrupt, or a lot of these big D2C brands going bankrupt, I believe some of them are because they expected that customer pot that they were building to be worth more
in the future.
And that didn't play out yet, and that means that they then have to go out and get more venture capital, which then changes their growth targets, which then changes that conversation. Yeah.
Right, and I'm wondering, like, how would the DTC brand, let's say when you work with a DTC or agency, when you work with brands, how does it really work? Like, in terms of charging them, like, would you guys charge completely management fee, or would it be commission? Because it does differ. Like, let's say if it's commission basis, you of course work harder, and it benefits both sides. Or do you charge a management fee? How does it really work?
Yeah, so we work on an hourly rate. We scope per hour. We don't charge a percentage of ad spend. So I know previously a lot of agencies were using a percentage of ad spend, but we've actually found it quite sort of beneficial from a new business point of view to be very transparent about what the fee is. As you scale, our fee, if you scale services with us, our fee will increase, but you will get more profit. You will generate more profit as you scale, rather than our fee increasing. Obviously, if our services, if the time we're spending on the account increases, then we will charge more. But yeah, I actually think now post iOS 14, and in the market that we're in, war, rising energy prices, inflation, I actually think agencies that charge a percentage of ad spend will have a more difficult time, because scaling isn't as easy as it used to be.
Right. Yeah.
And actually efficiency. Yeah, like, can we spend the same and generate more revenue? Like that's a very realistic. That's what a lot of brands want to do now. Like, we don't want to increase our outgoings. We just want that spend to be better performing.
I see.
And obviously, if that's the case, that agency isn't going to get paid more over time. Whereas, so that's the way we work.
Right. So it's like one of the cons of using percentage of ad spend is it's becoming more and more obvious with under recession. So because it's really hard to scale. Like, if people are not interested to buy, then you're screwed because you can't really scale it out.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, if the agency if they're forecasting their agency growth based on you as the brand increasing your ad spend from 100 grand to 200 grand over time, and that doesn't happen because the market isn't as ripe as it was, then that's going to be a difficult situation. And we've worked with brands that have moved away from agencies, where scale has been the agency's goal, and efficiency, ROAS, profit has been hurt. And while the agency got paid more as they grew their ad spend, they eventually lost that client. So, what's better in the long run? Yeah. Right.
Is it because of that then you decided to choose the path of charging per hour rather than management fee instead, rather than the ad spend percentage?
Yeah, I would say that's been one of the justifications to keep charging in that way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting as well to see this new model, because I always thought it's either percentage of ad spend or just commission to motivate people to work harder. So it's good to know, like, different ways of how agencies work. And it's good for all the marketers out there as well to see, there's not just percentage of ad spend, I suppose. Yeah. And I have some questions. So this is more towards agency side, if it's okay. So I just wanted to see how, if any agencies are working differently. So I've seen cases where some agencies, they ask employees to create a new Facebook account just to run ads. Would you say that is something that your agency would be doing, or
would this be a new ad account or a new Facebook profile?
A new Facebook profile to run the ad accounts for the clients. Well, what are your takes on that?
We don't ask staff members to do that. It ultimately comes down to the team member, if they want to connect their personal profile, if they want to use that login to log into our business manager, or if they want to create a separate one. Maybe they're not really on Facebook that much. So yeah, we don't really have it as a priority to define what team members do. Yeah.
Oh, right. Because I thought it could be like some cases where they just wanted security purposes. They didn't want like people to use their own personal accounts, so like in case if something happens. But some people debated to say like it's going against Facebook's or just any other platform's interest because they are kind of creating a fake bot account. So there are two school of thoughts. What's your take on this? Like just personal take.
Yeah, it's definitely against policy to have more than one profile per person. So
Right.
the likelihood of, 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line, Facebook saying, we've spotted that you've got two profiles and we're going to cancel this one. And then, you're blocked out of that profile. That could be an issue. I haven't seen it used. I haven't seen that happen yet, but it could do.
Right.
So yeah, I know it's never been a priority for us to define what team members, do.
Right.
Yeah,
That's true. That makes sense. Yeah, just quite curious as well because I do see some marketers have different approaches, and yeah, it's good to know. And circling back a bit about DTC, sorry about going off track, and just wanted to ask, like based on your observation on the DTC world from Q1 all the way to Q4, what would you say would be the marketing activities of each quarter be like? Like, would it be like Q4 is intense, and how will Q1 to Q3 be like?
Yeah, so good question. We as an agency, we really love Q1. We generally try and like drive a lot of growth during Q1 from a customer point of view. Q1, you start a new year. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of change in your life. Am I going to change the products that I'm buying, the brands that I'm buying? Am I going to try and generate new habits? Am I going to invest in myself more as a person? So there's a lot of change and optimism that happens in Q1. So we try and take advantage of that and really try and drive a lot of growth. And ultimately, if you can win in Q1, that really defines what happens the rest of the year. Q2 is really interesting because obviously there's a lot of seasonal peaks like Mother's Day, Father's Day, depending obviously on where you are, but most of those land in Q2. And then obviously Q3 is an interesting one. I would say the month that's really going to trip you up as a brand is August. August is a very, very interesting month because, especially in like the West, in America and in Europe, although some European countries they have their holiday in July, but August is usually a very quiet month from a performance point of view. Team members are on holiday, clients are on holiday, brand owners are on holiday. Not a lot of stuff happens in August. If you're a seasonal brand that launched two collections, spring, summer, autumn, winter, August is that month right in the middle where you haven't got any new product, stuff's going out of stock. So I would try and scale back in August, because if there's 1 month in the year where you're going to lose money, it's going to be August. Even if you're like a summer brand that's like bikinis or something to do with holidays, most people are buying those products before August
for the summer bond.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so like August is what's going to trip you up, and then obviously October, November, December, we're going to try and scale as early as possible,
right?
Because we can also get tripped up in December, where a lot of people are buying their Christmas presents or Black Friday stuff earlier. So most of the time, December will be a little bit of a quieter month. December sort of ends around the 15th. If it's like shipping cutoffs, we'll try and scale down from like the 10th or the 15th, depending on the brand. And then start scaling back up, Boxing Day, Q5, as people call it nowadays. Q5. That bit between Christmas Day and New Year's Day is, people call it Q5. So yeah, that's how I sort of paint the year, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, because I was wondering like how would I see some cases where some brands like they choose to lay low in Q4 because they know that they don't have the budget to compete with the big boys. So they said, you know what, let's just maintain ad spend, don't do anything, because if the more we spend, the more we're going to lose money. But on the other hand, some people are like, we should go all in because that's where we're going to generate 80% of revenue in Q4. Like, what are you waiting for? What's your take?
It depends on the brand and the product. Obviously, if it's a very Christmas gifting product, then you're going to have to advertise in Q4 to acquire because your customers that's when they're going to convert at the best rate. From a Black Friday point of view, ultimately it comes down to the requirements of a brand but the issue is customers that you acquire during Black Friday will usually be the worst customers ever.
Just discounts driven.
Yeah, discounts, especially from a lifetime value. If you think your lifetime value is $150 over a year, don't think that the customers that you acquire during Black Friday will also have 100 at that same lifetime value of the customer who you acquired in February or March,
right?
Because they're just buying you because of the message and the offer that you've got on during that period, and they probably won't come back and buy unless you're on offer again. Yeah.
True. It's like an impulse buy, like just an impulse buy season.
Yeah.
Right. Because I was also wondering I was about to ask you, it's like, in the week before Black Friday, I assume that will be the most you receive performance dip, right? Because that's where a lot of people they know Black Friday is coming, so they just click and just wait for you to deliver the magical discount code to them and let them put on the offer as a checkout. Is that the same case you've been facing so far?
Yeah, so we're definitely seeing that. I'd probably say it's not just the week before Black Friday, it's probably like the previous 4 weeks. And we're seeing like performance sort of dip off. We're also tracking those softer metrics, bounce rate, time on site, number of people adding to cart. If those are all staying quite consistent, then we can see that they're waiting. Are people signing up for emails at a high rate still? Then we need to keep that traffic going so that our email list gets even bigger. So when the offer or the gifting message comes around, when we've seen it on brands this week who've gone like a little bit early with Black Friday, like the performance is there and the customers want the product. It's just that they are potentially more price conscious at the moment, but that makes sense with inflation, recession, all of that. Yeah.
Right. And speaking of which, like when it comes to like scaling or when you stop spending, how would you determine using the right metrics? What are the metrics would you use when it comes to evaluating, let's say, this ad we should not spend or we should scale? How would your team approach this for this case? Would it be CPA or bounce rate?
Yes, for sure. So ultimately, it depends where Facebook is spending. Like the worst case scenario is Facebook is putting all of the budget into this one ad, and it's not performing. If Facebook isn't spending against the ads that are down here, then as long as they're not impacting the account, we'll leave them live because sometimes they might change over time. They might start receiving spend and come up the list. But yeah, it needs to be aligned with key client KPIs. So is it a CPA target? Is it ROAS target? But then also looking at like the overall forecast. Are we on track to hit the revenue target this month? Are we behind target? Are we above target? Because obviously if we're above target, we can say to the client, we can keep pushing and, try and exceed that target even more. Or we can try and scale back. ROAS might improve and try and land on that target, right on the nose. So it's really about, it depending like where are we in line with where we need to get to and having that conversation with the client. Yeah.
Right. And in the podcast itself, you have mentioned that you work with two types of clients. One is a seasonal account and one is a challenger DTC style brand. I'm wondering, could you break the ice and just explain to the audience, like what are the differences between those two? What defines a seasonal? What defines a challenger?
Yeah, for sure. Good question. So a seasonal brand is something where ultimately they're going to be having seasonal launches. So that might be spring, summer, that might be autumn, winter. They might have different launches each month. And the priority from a performance point of view is really getting the creatives and the product and the brand in front of the right people at the right time for the right price. And they're probably a little bit more protective over the brand message, the creative message. So really the message that we've got to go in front of customers, it can't really be changed that much. So the purpose there is focusing on the right campaign types, the right amount of ad sets, spending that client's budget in the best possible way. And that's a little bit less performance focused. It's more like running a TV ad or a billboard ad or a radio ad where you're more campaign focused.
Right.
And then the flip Yeah, it's 100% efficiency driven and scaling at the right time when they've got stock, when they've got new collections, and at the same time scaling back when, stock is starting to dry up, so we're going to scale back. And then the other side, those, like you said, those disruptor brands, they are more hook and concept driven, where we're trying to enter a market, disrupt the market, like you said. And the message and the creative is a little bit more up for grabs. We can test different creatives. We can try and be that disruptor brand. And there the focus is really on how high can we get the ROAS, how cheap can we get the CPA, and how much can we spend to try and deliver that brand's message and acquire customers. Yeah.
It's interesting to see maybe would you say it's more the seasonal campaigns are those big corporate clients that you have, and then the challenger brands are more smaller scale, still finding product market fit, or have just found one, and so you're just giving more creativity to explore and growth based, and another one is just efficiency based. Is that correct? Would you say it's more like that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's the right way of putting it. I would just add that those seasonal brands might not actually be corporate, and they might still actually be small, but chances are they're going to have a big catalogue. So it might be women's wear or children's wear or footwear. They're going to have a lot of products. They're going to have a big catalogue that we can advertise, and it's more like a traditional shop that you might walk into with a range of products. Whereas those challenger D2C brands who are a bit more scrappy, they might just sell one product.
Right.
And it's how well can we get that product in front of that customer and, solve their problem with the product. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So I'm wondering, for challenger brands, I assume they were most the small ones. What sort of budget requirement would you put for businesses that wants to run ads with your agency? In order for you guys to show results, what's the minimum? 5K?
Yeah, I mean, 5K is really where the minimum should be. We have worked with brands that have had less than 5K budget before, but that's because they've had they've been running for 5 to 10 years at a small scale. They've defined that product market fit. This is just the budget they have, and we can see what we need to do to try and use that budget in the best possible way. If you're a new brand, no product market fit, and you're coming to us, then, yeah, to tick that box that you have that cash flow, it should be around that 5K mark. If you come to us as a disruptor brand, you're trying to find product market fit, and you've got $500 a month, then chances are you haven't got much runway. Right. You might only have 3 months runway before you're going to run out of ad spend if we don't, generate a huge return on ad spend.
True. Since you're also taking into account the factor that there's a learning phase as well. At the first start, you're shooting in the dark, you don't really know. And with that low budget, it's more like them expecting you to gamble it in a lucky way. It's more on luck rather than skill based, would you say?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're putting out creatives, you're putting out copy, and you don't know the results that you're going to get back. And the trick is, you'll get some amount of data back. This ad might get 2 sales, this ad might get 5 sales, when you're hoping that that's statistically significant.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed that the one that with 5 sales is the one to go after. Whereas that thing might have just, it could have been incorrect attribution. It could have just been you got lucky with those 5 sales, and that's the other one has a better lifespan, or none of them. So yeah.
Right. So it's good to hear that the team has sort of a benchmark, because I do see cases where agencies taking as low as 4K or even 1K, and I'm just wondering what's your lowest you have tried running before, and that's absolute minimum, no not any lower than that, what 2K,
yeah, so
3K?
Yeah, it's definitely around the 1.5K is definitely the minimum, but I would say that that's not because we don't think it could work. It's because that raises doubts that brand has the cash flow and the right mindset to run ads for 6 to 12 months, for 2 years. Chances are if a brand comes to us with $1,000, $1,000, chances are that they've only got 2 months in front of them before they're going to say, yeah, I've run out of ad spend.
Right. Oh, I see. It's actually quite interesting to see how you guys use it as a spend indicator to project the hidden runway and try to guesstimate and say, okay, based on the budget and the scale. Also, would you use that just to guesstimate the runway without really asking them? So
Yeah, I mean, and we would still ask them because it's an important question. We know there needs to be transparency on that topic, but we'd also use other things that they might talk about in an onboarding call. Are they talking about cash flow? Are they saying they've worked with previous agencies and they run out of cash? Then that's that's an indicator that they're not in the right place to work with us for 2 years, because that's ultimately the goal. We want a long relationship. We don't just want to work with brands for 2 months. And then I did have another thing that I was going to say, but I've forgotten what that was. I mean it comes down to cash flow and mindset, and what we don't want is every brand out there will say, if we can get a 5x ROAS or a 3x ROAS, we've got unlimited budget. and a lot of young brands will say that, if we can get this, I've got unlimited budget. Yeah, but you say, well, what happens if we don't get that? For 3, 4, 5, 6 months, what happens if that's not the realist? Yeah, so that's what we need to ask.
It's interesting as well to see how, because I was wondering, like, how does other agencies evaluate the brands? Because some might just take in whoever that wants to join, and some are being quite careful. And if you're careful, so you will use cash flow just to have that transparency in order to have a long-standing partnership rather than short-term success or short-term gains.
Yeah, because it's important. I mean, we want to have those transparent conversations, and we want to do our the same way that a brand should review an agency, and are these the right people? We should review the brand, because ultimately, if we take this brand on, that might stop us from working with this other brand who could actually be a better fit. And also, if we bring this brand on, their cash flow is bad. We encounter issues or struggles or whatever, which doesn't happen very often, fortunately. Like, that's going to impact other things, the team, the culture. It's going to put pressure on people. Yeah, morale. Like, it's not just that the client's going to come on, work with us for 2 months and then go away, which doesn't happen. But, like, there's other things that, it's going to impact work on other brands. It bleeds out into every other element of the agency, for sure.
Right. And from then on, you have mentioned a lot on creative. So I just want to get your thoughts on a more tactical level. So in ads, like, to all the audiences out there, like, as you might know, we have the creative, the headline, and the copy. How would you prioritize the order of significance from the most important aspect to the least important aspect in terms of moving the needle for those 3 elements?
Yeah, for sure. So creative, out of those 3 elements, so creative, headline, and copy. Creative obviously takes up the most real estate in the ad. Right. So it's logical that that's going to have the biggest impact. But still, headline and copy are going to be legible to the audience when they read the ad. So we would try and get a benchmark of creative and copy and headline to use as the consistent. So can we validate 2 to 3 pieces of headline and copy that we can keep as the consistent? Because when we find those winning headlines, then that frees up the creative to test. Because then what we can do is we can test the creative while keeping the headline and copy consistent. Because then we're only testing one variable.
True. It's like a fixed variable for headline and copy, and the dependent variable using creatives because it takes up the most mental real estate of the users.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Obviously, like, the headline and the copy need to work with the creative. So if the creative is very different, the headline might not make sense. Right. So we might have to change the headline to work with the creative. So yeah, there's times when we would break that rule, but most of the time we would try and define the test to understand what is working.
Right, because I've seen cases where some marketers, they shared that a fun story I heard from one of the marketers that interviewed Andrzej Markovic. He was an extremely great performance marketing strategist. He told me that there's one story where he ran a creative with a wrong copy, and it did well. And he was like, "Oh, nobody reads the copy." So I'm wondering, what's your take on this, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that working. Spelling mistakes. Saying the wrong thing. A lot of the time we presume that audiences will read everything and not just click and then absorb the product. And obviously, if the creative is very legible about the problem and the product that they're trying to solve, it doesn't matter what the copy and the headline say. For some of it, obviously the copy and the headline are important, but we've seen ads work where there's been no copy at the top, because it's been like a bug, so there's been no copy. And it still works because the consumer can still read what's in the creative.
Right. So the picture tells 1,000 words rather than letting copy explain everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow, that's interesting. A bug that caused no copy and it just works.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Ooh, that's interesting. And you mentioned the creative process as well. You've touched on a concept and a hook. And for those to the audiences that are very new towards these two concepts, how would you explain these two to the new people?
Yeah, for sure. So a concept can be broken down as simply as like the reason for the ad to exist. So sometimes a concept will feature a number of different elements. So a concept could be UGC single image, a concept could be UGC video, a concept could be a certain pain point. So ultimately, the concept is the general, like the reason why that creative exists. What is the hypothesis? What are we trying to test? That will be the concept. How can we explain to someone very quickly what this ad is about? That is ultimately the concept. And obviously, different concepts will pull different elements from each other. So you might have two ads that you merge. That will then create a new concept. So the concept is generally like how we name the ad in the ad account as well. So the concept could be creative format, it could be message, it could be offer, it could be placement or platform, and it could be all of those things mixed together at the same time. So a concept can be as developed or as undeveloped as you want. And then ultimately a hook is that opening message that you're trying to attract someone in. So is it, TikTok made me buy it, or, the number of reviews. Yeah, like what's the problem that you're trying to grab the customer's attention with? That's the hook. Yeah.
Right. So you start off with a concept, a hypothesis, and then under the concept you have various hooks. Is that how your agency approached this way of doing ads?
Yeah, for sure. Because if we just launch one concept with one hook and it doesn't work, that doesn't necessarily mean that concept isn't working. It just means that it could be the message that we used. So you've got to A, B, C, D, E test every element. This hook might work with lifestyle photography. This hook might not work with UGC video. So you've got to mix and match all those different elements. Yeah,
it's interesting. So for your case, would you test different concepts like at one go with one hook each, or would you test one concept with multiple hooks, and then you move on to the next concept with multiple hooks?
Yeah, I mean, you can start in both places. Ultimately, you've got to try and keep something consistent. So our recommendation would usually be, depending on the product might have like multiple hooks that make sense. It might just have one hook. And if it's just got one hook, this product helps you sleep better, then we'll usually lead with that and change the concept. But obviously, if there's a product that multiple people can buy into, there's multiple problems, that we're probably going to try and keep the concept consistent and test the hook. So it's not a straightforward answer, but there's cases where you would do both. Yeah.
Right, it is interesting because I do see different practices. Like some people insist that you should have one concept and multiple hooks of the concept first. But some other people will argue that why are we testing multiple hooks at the start when you are moving smaller needles compared to just test multiple concepts at a time, then you zoom in and focus on the hook.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you bring it to the table to say that it also depends on the product. If it only has a concept, then it's really hard to test and squeeze out other concepts as well. And that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, ultimately it comes down to also like how efficient the ad account is. Like, are you over your ROAS target? If you are, then you can lose more money by testing lots of different things at the same time. If you're below your ROAS target, then you need to be careful about how much you're testing, because every new test is likely going to impact your ROAS until you find a winner, and that winner is obviously going to, hopefully push you past your target.
Right. And for these creative metrics as well, what sort of metric would you use to have the success? Some people would say the hook and the hold rate. Do you have any other metrics that come into your mind as well?
Yeah, for sure. So you've got to look at both those leading indicators and those lagging indicators. Ultimately, if you test your creative and your hook and your hold rate, are great and they improve on where your previous benchmarks are, but your ROAS and your CPA doesn't improve, that's going to be a difficult conversation to have with the client, because you're going to say, look, we improved our hook rate from 30% to 40%, or our thumb stop rate from 30% to 40%, but our ROAS has got worse. The client is then going to say, I don't really care about the thumb stop rate. We're generating less revenue. My profitability is getting worse. So click-through rate, cost per click, thumb stop rate, hook rate, hold rate, they're all important, and we can all use them to understand how the consumer is engaging with our content. But at the end of the day, the client's paying us for performance, ROAS and CPA or revenue or, whatever that might be. So you've got to align everything back to that, because, if I'm going to be the client, I'm going to say, I don't care about your, $1 CPC. Where's the revenue? Where's the profit? Yeah, for sure.
Okay, that's true as well. I figure sometimes we marketers are getting too stuck in obsessing creating the best engagement content, but sometimes brands will be like, hold on a minute, I don't care. Like, I would trade 0.5% click-through rate for 10 ROAS or 10 return on blended ROAS compared to 5% click-through rate with a 5 blended ROAS,
Yeah, exactly.
Right, I see. And would you be a big believer in creative fatigue as well, since with broad targeting, it's really hard to hit that benchmark? Like, are you a big believer in that?
A little bit, not as much. Like, we definitely have had accounts where, ads have been running for, 6 to 12 months. What's usually going to happen is, like, the ad set is going to over focus on, like, the same audience, so that first time impression ratio might drop. So it is likely that it'll be like an audience fatigue, and you might need to launch that ad in a new ad set to try and start again and find a different bubble of people. There's a huge audience on the platform. Like, the likelihood that creative is going to fatigue. What's going to fatigue is that breakdown effect. You're going to start with low hanging fruit,
right?
And it's going to go out. So therefore, that performance is going to get worse. That's to be expected. So, yes, creative fatigue it does exist, but we should expect it to happen as well. Like, we shouldn't be surprised when it happens.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's more like you should expect it, but don't be too overly obsessed about it, because sometimes you might not have tapped out. Because I do see some past practices that you kind of have frequency over 3, but right now people are like, actually, no, we shouldn't care about that. Like, until you really, really see drop off in overall revenue and not frequency itself.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, that's true. And I think that's something I want to have questions about. It seems like you are someone that cares about account simplification in your podcast. Would you say you're towards that, or would you be the opposite, like 10 different ad sets, like 20 ad sets, those crazy stuff?
Yeah, we this year we've definitely simplified a lot of ad accounts, just because it enables you to, as the media buyer, to focus on what's going to improve performance, which is the creative. So, like, simplification is important. Reducing the number of ad sets so that those purchases can be consolidated into fewer ad sets together, because then you can scale that. But at the same time, we do have ad accounts where the product, the audience, the territory that they're serving ads to, it does work with lots of campaigns and lots of ad sets.
Right.
So ultimately, it comes down to the efficiency. If you're missing your efficiency target, having more campaigns is going to make that worse, and reducing the number of campaigns is probably going to make that better.
True, since you are focusing more spend for Facebook to find the right audience rather than having multiple, which dilutes their spending power ability as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Correct.
Right. So it's more like using dynamic creative testing. Is that correct? Like, would that be the new way that your agency has been focusing on?
Yeah, we do use dynamic creative testing in the right way in certain cases. Yeah, that's a way that we could simplify the ad account for sure.
Wow, that's interesting as well. And you also work with multiple UGCs to create creatives. Is that correct? Rather than asking brands themselves to do it, according to your podcast.
Yeah, we'll deliver that content as long as it's like included in the scope of work. We generally find that if we handle that process, we brief, we generate the ideas, we create that content, we put the captions on, we create sort of like fewer pieces of content, but ultimately better content. Then we'll drive better efficiency. What we don't want is like a scattergun effect where you have like 25 assets. And they're all pretty rubbish. Like I would rather have like 3 or 4 assets that are all really good. So that's the focus, yeah.
Right. And just before we close off, I have just 3 final questions, if you don't mind. So just wondering, since Black Friday Cyber Monday is approaching and we kind of touched on a little, do you have any last minute tips for marketers preparing for Black Friday Cyber Monday?
Yes. So my one big tip is, make sure the Black Friday message is all over your website, merchandised on your website. If it's the announcement bar, if it's the homepage, if it's like under the product, can you put it next to the button, the buy now button on each product? Because what's going to likely drive the best performance in the ad account is those evergreen ads that you've been running for the past 6 months. It's not going to be the Black Friday creative that you launch tomorrow, because it's probably that Black Friday creative is probably not going to be able to find the learnings quick enough to understand who the audience is before you turn off those ads again. So your evergreen ads will drive the majority of traffic likely. So you need the message on site to convert those people. Yeah.
Right. So rather than just put it inside the ad, you should put it on a website. So in case, since evergreen will get the most learning, so most likely traffic will be there. So when they landed there, they might not have seen a Black Friday message on your ad, but they will see it on a website anyway. So either way, you still win.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And would you say like preparing email campaign would be something that you guys have done as well for the brands, like just to build up the email list to avoid competition?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. You want to convert those warm people that have signed up and they're waiting for the offers. So like we're going to see big spikes when we send emails. Yeah.
Right. And would that normally be done at Q3, or would you start all the way from Q1 and just getting the email list?
Yeah. You want to be building those emails all year round, because the email subscribers that you get in Q1 and Q3 are going to be really high quality.
Right.
So, if I subscribe to a brand in Q1 and I convert at Black Friday, I've took like a year to consider buying that. So it's a well researched,
Very
going to be made.
It's
a thoughtful process rather than just like seeing the ad tomorrow and buying it straight away. I might regret that decision. Yeah.
Right. That's interesting to hear as well. And just to end everything as well, since you are such a big fan of the DCC space, wondering, do you have any shout out to any amazing e-com influencers or marketers that we should follow? And what are the DTC brands should we follow as well as an inspiration?
A good question. I bet not many people have, no one's really ever asked me that question before. I mean, I would get onto Twitter. Twitter is definitely a great space.
Right.
All the people I engage with on Twitter, they're all really. I believe that as long as you enter Twitter with the right mindset of providing value, generating positivity, then you're going to find people with that like-minded mentality as well. But yeah, there's tons of really cool dudes and girls on Twitter. So yeah, this isn't a self plug, but hit me up on Twitter, see who I'm engaging with.
Yeah,
and you're going to be that's going to be a really good place to start with for sure. Yeah,
right. That's good to hear as well. And any other DTC brands that you find like a big fan of it as well for yourself that you
for sure. So we work with some really cool brands. Really cool brand, footwear brand called Viron, Viron. They're a really cool brand that we work with. They make boots made out of vegan leather. So they're a really cool brand that's like they're sold all internationally around the world. they've got a really high quality product. So similar brands like that. So, how are they trying to disrupt the market? What materials are they using? And how are they trying to, generate a better purchase from a customer? Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting as well. Like, it's good to hear that we have according to my Google search, comfortable plant-based shoes. Very interesting. Never heard about that before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks so much for sharing with us all the insights, Phil. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and listening. And to see you next time for the next episode. See ya, guys.
Cheers.